Hey guys, it's your boy Rocco. I wanted to share with you guys a new fitness app that I've been using called Mountain Tough. If you're serious about pushing your limits and building your mental toughness, you gotta go check out Mountain Tough. This isn't your average fitness app. It's built for those who never back down from a challenge. Mountain Tough started by training backcountry hunters for multi-day, high elevation, rugged terrain, and the ability to pack an elk in mountains. The training translated so well to the tactical application that many special operations, military, first responders, and law enforcement officers use the app today. You can see on their YouTube channel that they've been sharing their knowledge and training with guys like the 75th Ranger Regiment, which I was also a part of. This app allows you to train wherever you are with minimal equipment requirements. So whether you're in the gym, outdoors, at home, you can access top-tier workouts that fit your goals and lifestyle. In other words, you have no excuse. I have gone through my phases of my workouts, trying to get big, trying to get better, trying to get faster, trying to get this, and currently, this is the app I'm using. I want to be more functional in the field while out there with the Border Patrol filming what happens day in and day out on the borders. Download Mountain Tough app today and use the promo code BORDERLAND to get a 14-day free trial and 1 month free. That's 6 weeks of Mountain Tough at no cost. Go get them.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
We cut through the partisan talking points. We're not interested in perpetuating fear. We're interested in seeking truth, hearing what's really going on America's borderland. Welcome to this episode of Borderland. Slightly different one. I'm not sure if you guys I've ever introduced you, but I have my producer here with us today. Her name is Bruna, and she's the one who produces the show. And so we've been getting a lot of questions throughout the time of producing the show that we want to kind of have a questions and answers episode. We're going to do our best to answer as many of these questions, but there's some that are obviously so far off I can't answer. I'm going to do my best, but I hope you guys like it. And this is just going to be just free flowing. Let's see how it goes. Here we go.
We always have fun when we're discussing about the show. So
yes,
I think
I feel
hopefully the listeners will enjoy this. You know, we don't monitor, closely. We let, our subscribers can say whatever they want, but some of them have legit questions that they put in the comments. Some just make very interesting comments. Obviously, this content is non-controversial at all, so yeah. It's not like we don't get people riled up.
Oh, I read a comment the other day on Reasonable Fear that a guy said, I normally cannot stand this guy's podcast. It's just so boring, but these I really like. I was like, oh God.
I saw that one too. I'm like, hey.
I try not to let them bother me. I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
I saw that one too, and I laughed. I'm like, hey, listen, can't please everybody. So I'm glad that particular person, apparently they liked you doing more scripted stuff than non-scripted.
Well, for the audience, I'm asking questions, and we come up with the best questions we can for each of these guests. Some of these guests we get within a couple of days. Some of them we're prepared for, and sometimes when you bring on a guest, and it seems sometimes some of our guests have their minds occupied with other things. And so the interview is a little challenging because they're not fully into the conversation. And it's just, sometimes you get a call like, this guy's a really good interview, and you interview him and it didn't feel like, man, I'm not sure if that was a good interview. It felt a little slow or whatever. It's just different, every single person. And so we're doing our best to try and bring the most out of each expert we bring on. And, sometimes they're hit and misses. I almost know every time I get off, it ends and I'm like, oh, I don't know if that was a good interview. And I feel it, and then someone like, that's going to be a knockout. So it's an interesting side of my life, because normally I can what we're going to do today is more what I'm used to is just answering questions off the rip and no stress. Mm-hmm. But I've been getting better at this interviewing stuff that I find it pretty fascinating. So
yeah, you've been doing great. And like you said, we, sometimes before the guest even gets to you, I vet them. Sometimes we do, pre-interviews. And it's like, hey, it sounds great on our end. And it's like, cool, you're ready for the show. We'd love for you to talk to Vince. And then, they get to you. And then it was like, that was entirely not the direction that we thought was going to happen. You know, when they first talked to me, this wasn't, and I let them know, like, sometimes I say, hey, Vince is very interested in this based on your expertise. This is probably most likely the direction the interview is going to go. But like, I don't try to, you know, I like giving you the freedom to take the interview whichever direction you want to take it. You know, for you, you're in the moment and it's organic. But there are times, man, that no matter what, we were as prepared as we could be on our end. You were prepared, and then the interview still went off the rails. So
it happens.
Yeah, good. I mean, just part of podcasting. All right. Well, I've gone through YouTube. I've seen some of the comments and some of the questions, and I've picked out a few that I think it would just be interesting for you to touch on. And, you know, some of them, neither you nor I could really give an informed opinion or answer to, because we don't, you know, I don't work for the FBI or the CIA. I don't work for Capitol Hill. So, you know, but that doesn't mean that you can't at least speculate. So I'm going to start with this one, and we'll put the questions up for you guys that watch on YouTube, so you'll see it. But we've talked about this one-on-one before, but our listeners haven't heard this before. So I'll start with this one, which is a very popular one. So Vince, if you were in charge of the Border Patrol, how would you change operations to be more effective and efficient?
I'll say this. It would take more than me being in charge of the Border Patrol to really get a hold of the immigration situation. We'd have to be all the way in charge of Homeland Security as a whole to really make an effect that even reaches the Border Patrol's career field. And so, like, I'll answer it more in that way, because the Border Patrol, what the Border Patrol currently does is the job of the Border Patrol. They're still apprehending and they're still processing. They're still at strategic locations to identify anyone coming into the country illegally. So they're still doing their job. What changes is, as soon as they're apprehended, with policies that are in place don't allow them to do anything more, like sending them to ICE, which then ICE either deports them or whatnot. That doesn't happen currently with this administration. Most of these people are coached and taught to seek asylum, and then they're into the asylum system, which is a whole different ball of wax we could talk about later. Now, if you want to create change in what's happening currently right now, if you want to see, I guess, the feel of not so open borders, then you would have to address the current administration's policies. We'd have to change the asylum policy to be more strict, to be what it used to be when I was in, from 2009 2015. There was very minimal amount of countries that were authorized to be on the asylum list due to their country's disposition, whatever was going on in that country. So at the time when I was El Salvador, because of a lot of the gang stuff that was happening, just kind of the instabilities of the country at the time. So on and so forth. Different countries have different parameters of what is determined to be seeking asylum. Now, if Mexicans came across at the time illegally, they weren't allowed to seek asylum, even though their country was kind of in disarray because of the cartel. It wasn't on the list of asylum cases, so they weren't identified as an asylum seeker. Currently, in the past 3.5 years, almost anyone could seek asylum, and then from that point, their paperwork gets processed as a seeking asylum participant, and so then they're released into the country as a notice to appear, and then they have to wait a certain amount of time to see an immigration judge to determine their case. If 100% of them came back and were having their cases reviewed, there would be a good percentage of them who would be getting deported because it doesn't match the asylum case situation, right? The asylum case that what they're actually, the immigration judge is looking for. But most of them are not coming back to the immigration hearing, so they are lost in the system now somewhere in America, whether they're working, whatever the case. So what I would do is change that asylum to be more strict. Really look at the countries that deserve it right now based on humanitarian situations, economic situations, and really shorten up that a lot more. The other thing is, anyone that enters the country illegally should have some kind of, some kind of jail time, some kind of negative disposition, because then it would cause a deterrence. What happens is everyone now knows the cartel, the transnational organizations, everyone from South America to all countries around the world They know this asylum situation is happening and they're abusing that. Okay. And so the cartel's like, hey, come in now. Even right now, it's even bigger because who knows who's going to be elected president. And they're kind of banking on the stress of, well, if it's Trump, everything's shutting down. So now it costs more. And so they're using that to their advantage to make more money. And so I would definitely ask for more jail time or some kind of a serious repercussion for crossing illegally. But on the other end of that, if someone is seeking asylum, then they should seek asylum the correct way, right? Which usually it talks about from the next closest country or area that they can feel safe and they can seek asylum. That's not happening currently. They're crossing 5 countries, coming to America, seeking asylum here because they know our loophole. The other side of that is that our legal immigration system takes many years for good individuals. I'm talking high quality doctors, teachers, educators, scientists, even just people who just want to work a regular job, who are really good standings with the country. It takes them 5, 10, 15, 20 something years at times. And so we really need to take a deep dive into looking at our legal immigration system. How can we make that a more streamlined process so the people who are trying to do it the right way, by the way of the law, aren't watching all these individuals come over illegally and get released into the country within 72 hours. Mm-hmm. And so we would have to really fix that system internally. Externally, we should be educating other countries on what the legal process is. We should be telling them, explain to them that right now you're being manipulated by these cartels, by these transnational organizations, and they're treating it like almost like a travel agency, but this is in the wrong case. And if you cross over this way, you're going to be held at jail time, which is going to hurt your chances of actually coming to America the right way. And so those are the things that need to be done. We need to really educate other countries on the legal system and how we do it here. We need to streamline our legal system currently right now. We have to have better observations and better looks into what this asylum situation really is. And if we have a backlog as much as we have now that's taking years, maybe we need to hire more immigration judges to kind of decipher these cases faster. So I'll stop there with that one.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with everything that you just said. So thank you for the very thorough answer. I bet our listeners will be happy with that. Now that we know what you would do if you were in charge.
Yes.
So the next question, this one I found interesting. Well, I'll just go with it. So why don't they, or I mean, meaning the United States, why don't they fight cartels in US soil? Cartels distribute all the drugs all over the US and we can't stop them. So why aren't we fighting in US soil? Should we fight in US soil? What does it mean? I guess this comment, it's kind of a comment and a question together. And I found that interesting because it's like, it is, we're already having spillover. Well, 100% we are. Like even, the latest reports, all the drone activity that we're seeing extremely close to the borderline, so no doubt spillover is going to be a thing. I guess I'll throw in my question, like, are there advantages to fighting in US soil? Should we be fighting cartels in US soil?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's use the example of TDA as an organized crime entity here in the United States that spill over from illegal immigration. Let's use that as the example here. TDA, the Tren de Aragua, right? Mm-hmm. They're now spread throughout America in small little cities and they're causing chaos, right? Why can't we just bag them all up and take them back? Well, it's not that easy. There's some people that are, when they're caught doing a crime, then they get arrested, then it goes to the DA and the DA throws the case out. In New York, that's happened several times now. And so once you're into the America side of things, well, now you fall under the whole justice system that we have and the due diligence of that justice system. And so can we fight cartel? Yeah. Identify to me someone who's a cartel member and let me witness them have a crime, or you have the evidence that they've broken some kind of law. And then we can go ahead and arrest that individual and try and prosecute based on the city that they live in. Is the DA going to prosecute based on what the crime is? Okay. Can you associate them with the cartel? That's not always easy to do. You can say there's tattoos that are familiar to gang association, right? You can do all these things, but then actually tying them back to a cartel in another country is a little bit of a challenge. And so the only thing, law enforcement does this all the time. They're arresting people who have associations to the cartel, but it's not because we're identifying cartel members. We're just stopping people from breaking the law or catching them after they've broken the law and there's evidence that's kind of been laid at the table. And so there's definitely spillover. There's cartel, and levels of that. When I say levels of that, you're not going to have these big cartel bosses always putting their face out to the world. So we don't really know who they are. And if we do, most of them kind of stay quiet. But the lower level soldiers, the guys who are kind of handling the infrastructure of drugs and kind of that world, or human smuggling, those are cartel members as well.
Yeah.
They're just kind of lower on the totem pole.
Yeah.
And so those people get apprehended all the time. When you see, I saw a news thing the other day with 6 people that are apprehended, involved in child trafficking. Those are cartel members being apprehended because they've broken the law in America, and we can actually prosecute at that time. So currently, we are doing our best as a country and law enforcement across the nation to apprehend these individuals. But we can't just go and say, hey, that guy looks like cartel. He has a cartel tattoo. Let's tackle him.
Right.
That's not how this works. Because
Right.
when you're in America now, we have to follow the legal system. So, yeah, law enforcement across the nation. I'm in close contact with a lot of people who've been apprehending individuals who are tied to cartel, and it's just not that easy. In the end of the day, let's have a different question would be, is there ever a time where we'd probably have to go to war with the cartel in Mexico? That's a bigger question. But I'll tell you, the closer it gets to us. Oh, so I'll say this. Let me say this. In the Border Patrol, we know when we're apprehending drugs, there's a chance there's probably weapons involved.
Mm-hmm.
Good chance if there is. Okay. Now, you would see a lot more security down on the border and a higher elevation of, or higher escalation of security, because the threat levels, if we were actually engaging with the cartel back and forth. Some people have the misconception that BORTAC, BORSTAR, Special Operations Units, and Border Patrol agents are shooting cross country at each other because of this war on drugs. That's absolutely false.
Right.
There is engagements at times, few and far between, and there is a low chance of a cartel member coming across and engaging on an agent, because that causes a massive influx of security and investigation, and it kind of puts a rift in the system, right? We screw up the system that they've kind of created and they're happy with. They get enough dope across, we catch enough dope. It's kind of this win-win situation. We obviously want to catch it all, but they're really good at what they do as well, right? And so it's this cat and mouse game that happens daily. But if they elevate the security threat, then we will as well, and it'll be a lot harder for them to cross drugs or human trafficking. That will eventually affect them financially. And so they won't mess with that. If you've seen in the news, let's use by example, the 4 individuals that went down to Mexico, and what was in the investigation, that they were going there to do cosmetic surgery and they were caught in a crossfire. They were engaged and killed. Few weeks later, the cartel apprehended every individual that was associated with that shooting, and boom, gave them up. It's like, these are the ones. Why? Because it's kind of a sign of good faith. Hey, that wasn't us. That was kind of some rogue dudes. We wouldn't do it like that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want tension between the US and Mexico cartel world, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So these are things that we go to see that the cartel does as almost the tip of the cap. Like, hey, we didn't do that. That wasn't associated. Or if it was, he went rogue. We took care of him for you. Continue on. And it's this really weird, it's like an ethical version of what happens on the border with drugs and law enforcement. And so, is there a threat? Absolutely. I've known several agents personally that had to engage on someone who was carrying drugs, who pulled a gun on them. Yes, it happens. Not as often as you think, because there is some kind of homeostasis that tries to be kept by the cartel on the borders.
That makes complete sense. And I'll use the next question because I think it's a good segue to kind of keep that same train of thought. So the comment itself is, does anyone here realize if the cartels are given the label terrorist organizations, it changes the way on a legal level how the US classifies individuals wanting to live here? Going in that thought too, of like fighting on US soil, but also if cartels are officially given terrorist organization label, can you dive a little bit deeper on what would that mean if they are classified as that, and that changes on a legal level? I mean, I imagine that would have a sort of domino effect on everything, on immigration policy, definitely on national security. But, as we've seen throughout the show, those are so intertwined closely intertwined together. So like if that were to happen, I believe Governor Abbott there from Texas has been on that train of trying to get cartels.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the fight to try and get the cartels labeled as a terrorist organization. There's two trains of thought on that. I'm very curious to hear what he was trying to say in the rest of his question, but he didn't flesh out that question good enough for me to understand it. But so if they are deemed a terrorist organization, what one thought process is, now we can use military force and we can actually do cross-border operations to try and dismantle the cartel. Okay. That's an interesting one. It also, from a former operator himself who used to do, kill or capture missions in Iraq and Afghanistan for the same labeling. It is doable if we got that, if they end up giving them that nomenclature. I know exactly what the military can do. Got it. But is that something that we're willing to do with a bordering country that is one of our biggest allies in multiple different things, from trade, just the position of families that are across from Mexico to America, a lot of things there that I think personally we want to keep in good standing. And my biggest concern is how infused is the cartel into the government, whether, and this is a very I have this whole blog site that I've been working on for this whole journalism crap. I say it like that, but it's called All Lines Are Blurred. And when
Vince
I talk about
school,
the subject,
guys, that's what he's talking about.
I'm in school, finished my master's in journalism, and they made me do this thing. But either way, the title of it is called All Lines Are Blurred. And because the more I've studied this subject, the more I've dug into this, it's a very blurry space of what's right and wrong, right? It's not necessarily white or black, it's gray.
Yeah.
And when I say that, how infused the cartel is into the Mexican government, personally, I believe it's highly infused at the highest levels, but not in this corruption state that we view it, almost as it's an acceptable infusion of we work together to help the country in that mindset. Yeah. And so as Americans would look down upon it and say, hey, they're corrupt, they're paying off Bill and Bob or whoever the heck, right? I see them as fully integrated as a system trying to improve the country, but yet doing barbaric shit at times to try and gain notoriety and power. So it's this really weird space that I believe happens there. So in that sense, if we choose to actually label them as a terrorist threat and we start to engage with military, I think it really raises, I don't think there will ever be a war against us and them. It doesn't make sense. I think more so it destroys this relationship between a boring neighbor who we should actually try and be in a better position with. We should actually try and work with, if not be bigger allies with each other, because of our lack of solid relationship with Mexico throughout the years. You've seen a lot of China coming in and kind of creating space there, purchasing land and helping financially with different structures being built out there, which becomes this very strategic move by China in a militaristic way of saying, hey, let me get closer to my enemy by befriending their enemy almost, and it's one of those things that I feel is potentially happening. And so I think instead of making them, I would love to see Mexico be more empowered to control this, but it always brings up the question to me is we're the demand, you know what I mean? We're the ones who have the demand of drugs, the high influx of drugs. So what's going on in this country that we should probably address first, and then we can identify that, but we're the ones purchasing it. We're the ones, aiding in this effort, which is very sad. But now the human trafficking side of it becomes it kind of convolutes this whole conversation to try and understand it better. But there's a lot of things to unpack there, and I would love to have had him flesh out his question so I could try to answer a lot better. But that's what I think. If we target them as a terrorist organization, we can now use different kind of tools so we can try and engage, kill or capture and dismantle that organization. I just fear the repercussions of it. I'm the guy that, look, I've done that, lived it, and if you want me to go do it again for the right reasons, hey, let's go. But that's a neighboring country that I fear what long-term repercussions that can do on the country as well. So it's an interesting comment. It's an interesting thing that a lot of, Texans are supportive of, and some of these, Abbott and several other organizations. I'm curious to see the flip side of that, what that looks like.
Well, if I may, because just hearing you, obviously I do a lot of research on the show, so I'm trying to always stay ahead. Or what I've been lately doing is actually going behind, and seeing what different tactics have been used in the past. And obviously, I've been researching so much about what Felipe Calderon did, the war on drugs. He took a
Yes.
military, a more militarized approach to trying to gain control and eliminate the cartels in his own country. And obviously a very different approach from AMLO, that was hugs not bullets. And
Yes.
both approaches had disastrous
Yeah.
results, unfortunately. And so even with seeing that comment on YouTube, I'm like, yeah, labeling the cartels as a terrorist organization, and I agree with you. I think that'd be very detrimental to the US and Mexico relationship in general. But then, like, what's the way out? Because then saying, why doesn't Mexico do that? Well, Mexico did that, at least through what Felipe Calderon
Yes.
tried to do.
Yes.
That was awful. There so many innocents, good Mexican people died through that militarized approach. But also, hugs not bullets, also not, I mean, in my opinion, that was also not a correct approach as well, that made any difference in the cartel's power in Mexico. I mean, if anything, right now, the Jalisco New Generation cartel just gains more power astronomically, on an exponential level every single day. I don't know what Claudia Sheinbaum is going to do, but
that's the That's the question. What happens there in Mexico with the new leadership? But I want to add to you and I know, just because the supply stops in Mexico, in America, we have places that make methamphetamines. We have people that are growing weed, right? Like, so if we cut off that supply because it's easy, I don't see why Americans who are hard up on making money, who part of their own corruption world, don't start producing fentanyl their own as well.
Right.
It's not an impossible task for them. And so I think because we have the means to, we can purchase fentanyl, right? Or they can. But once the means are cut off due to us, say because we call them terrorists and we go out there and dismantle the cartel, there's nothing stopping people from doing it here like they had with meth throughout all these years.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it comes down to, again, is like our own country, we really need to get a grasp on how we can help with this addiction epidemic, right? This drug epidemic that's happening with opiates, that started with opiates and the massive push for Oxycontin and everything else that was happening throughout the years, this very shady version of our big pharma. But now we have generations who are addicted to this drug, and which now has fueled the cartel making money and every other transnational organization that's helping with, also including China. So it's like a multi-layered shit sandwich that we have to figure out. You know what I mean? It's like we can't forget every angle of this. Is like, God, that's another reason why we have such an addiction space. We forget that, that. So listen, I don't know what the right answer is, but one of the big answers, we should look within ourselves in this country and see how we can help ourselves first. In my opinion, the drugs that is killing them is being purchased by Americans, right? Those Americans who are now selling them to addicts who are in America. And so I think we have to look at both sides of that.
Yeah. Well, that actually is, again, another great segue. Again, this one was more of a comment, but it plays into what we've been talking about. So this subscriber said, if we care so much about stopping addiction, we should start with the pharmaceutical industry, who have children high on pills at a young age. Then they get to an adult age and transform. And I guess he meant to say they then move to illegal drugs rather than the legal ones prescribed by the doctor. Big example was something like Adderall. All through college, I noticed the kids who really get into cocaine oftentimes are the ones who have been on Adderall for most of their lives.
Yeah, I don't know what the statistics are to that correlation of Adderall to cocaine, but look, I grew up in LA, man. Cocaine was everywhere, right? And so I'm very fortunate to not have gotten tied into that world, but I've seen really good friends get tied into it. And yes, he's correct. The pharmaceutical, that's exactly what I was trying to say earlier, is that the pharmaceutical space was really the initiators of this epidemic that we currently face, who have also fueled the cartels' choices to go into, the fentanyl, into methamphetamines, right? These synthetics, right? The synthetic drugs,
synthetic
because
drugs.
it's cheaper, it's easier to make. And so, America, we're the ones who fueled it, but by the fact that we were screwed over by the big pharma who created this generation of addicts.
Yeah.
And addiction's so fucking hard, man. That's a hard one. So I think that comment is absolutely correct. We have to look within ourselves and why the country was pushing so hard at the time, and now it's created this monster that we have to try and get a hold of, and which has only further fueled the this war on drugs.
Stick with me, because we've discussed this, I think, probably more one-on-one ourselves, or I think I wrote it in a question for an interview, and I don't think we ever really got an answer from the guest. But I have always wondered, there are legitimate medicinal uses for fentanyl, so it's not like it's something that you don't want to go into surgery without, having fentanyl, in anesthesia or whatever. So there are legitimate needs for it. Obviously, it has gotten out of control, and now we have this awful addiction, and it's become this awful murderer of hundreds of thousands of Americans. And I guess I just wonder, hypothetically, what would happen, and I'd like to get your thoughts on, let's just say magically we were able to get rid of the fentanyl, stop the supply, whether that is coming from Mexico. I just think, what would happen again within our healthcare system? Because now we have produced this awful addiction, and all of a sudden, let's say if the next president is able to completely eliminate the flow of it, that's also awful, because now we're dealing with our people, just the mass withdrawal that would happen, within our country. Like, I don't know, stopping that could also, in my mind, completely destabilize healthcare, because then if we can only get fentanyl for medicinal and legal use, and we were able to completely stop the flow of illegal, but we have hundreds of thousands of Americans currently addicted to it. I don't know. I just think that could completely destabilize us from within as well.
What I think is fascinating about the opiate crisis, right, fentanyl included, is that it's not like alcohol. If you're an addict with alcohol and you stop cold turkey, it'll kill you. Fentanyl, opiates won't kill you. It's just a really bad withdrawal that most people aren't willing to put themselves through, right? They don't have the support system to get them through that. So they have things like Suboxone clinics, and essentially what it is another synthetic opiate that helps them wean off of the addiction. And so they're all over in Utah. They're all over the place. Suboxone, and there's another one that they use as well. But essentially, we'd probably have to pick up some more clinics that offer that remedy that is helping them wean off of, and that's an outpatient situation. They wake up in the morning and they go get their servings of Suboxone, they take it, and then they go to work and go about their day. It's kind of a court ordered situation for addicts, right? And it's proven to work. Eventually, they're going to have to wean off of Suboxone as well and be completely sober. It's a tough road. Not saying it's easy. I'm saying if we were able to stop it, I think it would save a lot of lives, because of the fact that we're not letting them putting it into their system and then going into some respiratory distress. And so it's a tough one, but I know there is options out there that states like Utah have been very successful with in trying to wean people off of this opiate crisis and into Suboxone and methadone. That's what it is, those two. And so we'd probably have to implement a lot more of those across the nation and help people wean off of it and get more programs out there. It's tough, man. I've seen addiction firsthand, how bad it can be with some people, really close friends of mine. And I just know how challenging that is. There's no mother or father who are willing to lose everything by drugs, but they still do it because the addiction is that strong, right? It got a hold of them that bad. I wrote an animated film about that same exact subject, watching a friend's wife struggle with a very similar addiction. And so, it hits near and dear. And I think we definitely have to start addressing within how do we help our people, and how do we not create another generation of addicts.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. It may be wishful thinking, but yes, I really hope whoever the next administration is, that they devote some true care and thought to this issue.
What's fascinating is that when I was in from 2009 to 2015, I say those dates just so we kind of know this is the Obama era. He was deporting a ton of migrants who came over illegally, very strict on immigration policy. It was a really good policy,
Hmm.
right? It was done well. But the other thing was that when I was in, drugs, marijuana was huge, and was still during the transition of the United States, kind of legalizing it here and legalizing it
Yeah.
there, right? So marijuana was extremely prevalent. I'm talking, we'd get loads of thousands and thousands of pounds of dope. And it was like those were like good, successful nights for the Border Patrol. You're like, hey, dude, we caught 3,000 pounds. Like, man, that's crazy, right? But the wild thing is that when you go out there now, I spend time on the border often, and I'm out there with the agents. I'm like, hey, is there a lot of dope? And they're like, no, not so much. And I'm like, why? There's more money in human trafficking.
Yeah.
There's more money in human smuggling.
Yep.
And so the transition is weed, not so much. Fentanyl, yeah, there's still good money in that. Cocaine, still good money in that. Methamphetamine, still good money, right? Because those are the synthetics that they can create. Cocaine's a little different, but there's always going to be some kind of people in this United States who have the flavor for cocaine.
Right.
It's a very, very specific drug that's usually a very specific demographic, the party scene, whatnot. But the synthetic drugs, who are very cheap to create and the payoff is huge, okay, they'll keep doing that, and they'll keep smuggling that. But you don't find very often, these young smugglers with 100-pound bundle on their back walking
Right.
across the border. You don't find that as often, because why? There's no payoff compared to just crossing illegals.
Yeah.
Boom, right through. Whether they make it or not, you still get paid. And so the commodity has changed for them on what brings value financially. And it's not the marijuana bundles like it used to be. It's now humans. And that's why in the past 3.5 years, they've seen the loophole in the system, and they've been able to capitalize it financially for themselves, because it doesn't matter if you get caught, you're still getting in.
Yeah.
And so that is almost a selling ticket for them to say, listen, the policy right now is perfect for everybody. Come in, come on. It's like the circus. Everybody come in, have a good time. Because if you cross here, you're getting in. Just tell them you're seeking asylum, give them this address, and then go about your way. Go about your business.
Yeah.
And so that's why you've seen, a drop in the marijuana apprehensions on the border, and you've seen a massive uptick in human smuggling.
Well, yeah, because it's easy now. Getting in is easy, and going back to, I think, what you touched on in our very first comment or question, the illegal way is easier than the legal way at this
Absolutely.
point, currently, at least.
We'll say it's almost incentivized.
Oh, for sure.
So
Yeah, within the parameters we're talking about, yes, I completely believe that. And
well, let me stop right there. You yourself went through the legal process, didn't you?
I did, yes.
And how long did that take you?
I became a citizen 1 month today.
You know more about America than I do, because those tests are so hard.
I did, yeah. I had my citizenship ceremony a month ago, exactly. After being here, let's see, my family and I moved here in 2001. So yeah, about 23 years.
Can I ask how your family moved here?
Well, yes, my dad, he got a job transfer. So I'm originally, well, for our listeners, I'm originally from Brazil. And when I was 7, my dad was very fortunate to receive or get transferred from his job. He worked for a big company, and that had a plant in Brazil. And then he got an opportunity, much better opportunity, to come here and work at a different plant here in America.
And that was on a work visa, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I understand, when we talk about this, like my story, I consider myself a very privileged immigrant, because yes, I went from visa to green card, from green card to citizenship. And I was very fortunate I was young. So while I'm still fluent in Portuguese. You know, I learned English from a very young age. I went from second grade to 12th grade. So I know American history. It's, you know, going through the citizenship process for me personally, it wasn't as grueling as, you know, let's say an immigrant who's only been here a few years, who came a little later in life, you know, maybe like my parents, they came in their 40s at the time, you know, they weren't educated here. They had to learn English at a much later age in life, which is harder. And, you know, so some people say like, hey, we can totally hear your accent. Some people don't hear an accent when I talk at all. If you talk to my parents, you know for sure they're not Americans. Both very thick, charming accents. But with myself and with my brother, some people wouldn't guess it. And so even for them, it was a lot more challenging, you know, going through this because of, I can imagine not for my parents, but for a migrant that isn't as fluent in English and hasn't been here very long, doesn't know American history. It can be very challenging, and it is also a very expensive process, even just the initial fees.
How much was, just kind of a ballpark, the total you paid during this process?
Oh gosh. Well, again, for me, I will say this. I'm very privileged because, you know, I have a good job, and in the state where I am, the immigration office is about 20 minutes away from my house. So when Homeland Security called me to do my interview, I only had to drive 20 minutes, and it's the only location in the state of Virginia. For someone that lives all the way up in Northern Virginia, or, you know, they're doing a lot more travel. So it's hard to say like how much exactly it is. It's going to vary from person to person, but just the initial application fee with, you know, taxes and everything, it's about $800, just the initial application fee, you know, to go on the government website and apply that you want to be considered for citizenship. Now, you know, and then couple that, you know, if you're traveling from farther away for your interview, if you've got kids, if you're, you know, having to stay at a hotel somewhere, because you live so far away from the only immigration branch office in your state, you know, if you need a translator. So if your English isn't very good and you need a translator, if you know, I'm a very privileged case, so I don't want to speak for those who I'm sure have had much harder experiences going the legal way. I'm not going to get on any pedestal because I'm someone who's very privileged. I'm fluent in English, moved here at a young age, and I have no criminal record, you know? So I have a green card, a driver's license. I'm legal all the way.
Now you're naturalized, right? Now you're a citizen.
Yes. Yes, I get to vote my very first election. This one.
This is a great one to vote for.
It's a great one to start with.
Yeah. What other questions do we have?
Well, here's a straightforward one, Vince. Do you know how much air power does the US have on the border?
Border Patrol has, I think it's called AMO now, is the name, is part of Homeland Security, which is the air version of Border Patrol, who supports the borders. And so we'll check on the term, but I think that is it. But yeah, we do have air assets, but they're not Border Patrol air assets. It's its own entity. And they support us day in and day out during missions. If they're flying in the area and say there's a group, we say, hey, do you guys have eyes on? They'll fly in the area. They'll see if they identify. They'll help guide us in. Some of them even park their helicopter, get on foot to apprehend them, and then get back on their helicopter and take off. So we do have air assets. We use them for multiple different things. For Borstar, we use them for search and rescue as well. We also use them for long line rescues. Special operations uses them for rappels or fast ropes if needed, insertion for any kind of mission. And so we do have access to air assets across the border. It just depends on what location, where, and when they're flying. So I've done missions down in the RGV sector, and they were a huge asset for us, working different groups and smuggling cases. And so, yeah, it's pretty valuable. We use them a lot. And then when we talk about drones, yes, the the cartel is using drones currently, and the Border Patrol, I won't speak on what they have access for or if they even have access to it.
Right on. What were to happen if drugs were legalized? What would happen to the cartels?
I think it's the same answer for if we're able just to stop the drugs in total. Um, I think the cartels and the transnational organizations are realizing how much money is in human trafficking in just bodies. And so I think they're slowly transitioning to ways of being better at that, using that commodity. But if you've watched some of our shows, if drugs don't make the cartel money, they will find other ways of making money, meaning hotels or crops or different business, the avocado farms, and so the cartel, think of them as a business. Think of it very similar to what the Italian mob did back in the day, what a lot of organized crime does. They eventually try and go legit, and they try and use that money to create other assets to provide more money, and they kind of going to go that direction. I don't think it's any different for the cartel. A lot of the big hotels and tourist attractions are some way, shape, or form owned by or supported by cartel. So I think it's just the like I said, it's not so black and white over there in that conversation. It's more like this is common. They put the money up for a good business so they can help hire more Mexicans and thrive. And so I don't see them see it the same way we do. We kind of demonize it intentionally because it is kind of a threat to us in America. But like the way they see it is not so much the same. And so it's not so black and white. And so when I say that is if drugs were legal, they'd find another way of making money because that's what organized crime does. And I think they're going to continue to find ways of making money through human smuggling.
Yeah, that was my initial thought when I read that comment. I'm like, it's kind of already happening to an extent. They're already seeing more money in human smuggling than with drugs. I even read an article trying to prepare for one of your interviews, but this is unconfirmed, so I didn't want to, touch the resource. But I even read somewhere that there was one cartel in Mexico that even like Wi-Fi towers they were gaining control of and making residents of that particular village or town pay an astronomical price, to keep using Wi-Fi. And, so they've already expanded and into new industries and new levels of extortion that have nothing to do with drugs at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a business, and
they're a business, and what they sell is commodities, and if it's not drugs, it's something else.
Yeah, they'll find something else in high demand and be able to extort that. So all right, well, I think we can wrap this up now. You may choose or not choose to answer this final one, but it may be something that I have a feeling a lot of our viewers and listeners may be wondering. Who are you voting for, Vince?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, that's a good question. Like being in a position where I have a platform and I can voice an opinion, it might be influential to others. I feel uncomfortable trying to steer anyone into what I want to choose because I feel like it's a little unfair. I think people really need to take their politics more serious, and they need to really review and understand policies that are important to them, that are near and dear to their heart, that they find they just can't live without, and vote accordingly. I think everyone who watches this knows which direction I'd probably vote because I do believe in better border security. But I also, I want the United States to continue to be a successful country. And so, it's a very, very important time, but I do not want to be the person that tries to influence people to vote in any direction. So I'll leave it at that. I'll say this, like what's near and dearest to my heart is Border Patrol agents and their families.
Yeah.
In the past 8 years of politics, the career field has been pulled into this political argument, and not intentionally, but it just became an easy target for the media to use. And I would more so say that I hope that in the future that they can remove the political agenda with the Border Patrol as their scapegoat, because it's unfair to the the career field and my brothers and sisters who are out there doing their best to protect, to save, to just safeguard all human life that comes across illegally. And so, with the 4 years of Trump, the media wanted to make the Border Patrol look like they're the bad guys and they do this terrible stuff. And now this next 4 years, it's the opposite, where people are like, they're not even doing their job. They're not. And so it's this really crazy tug of war that's happening currently for the career, that I would say that it's a little unfair, and it's not easy for everyone to kind of take that scrutiny for 8 years of their career and try and be, content. And those of you who do the career field, I have nothing but the utmost respect for you. I just think of I guess the Bible scripture says this too shall pass. I think the Border Patrol, I said it in my book, it just comes in waves. There's good years, there's bad years, there's good years, there's good political officials that are good for the career field, and there's some that aren't. Stay the course, collect that retirement, be proud of you, those few who are willing to do this job, even through this deep scrutiny that the public just has no clue over. And so part of this podcast is to educate people on what happens, and is almost the byproduct of that is I hope people give more respect to the Border Patrol agents, the ICE agents, and Customs agents who are doing their jobs diligently to just try and help protect America.
Yes. We greatly value their service.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Borderland and Ironclad Original. I'm your host, Vince Vargas. If you guys have any other questions and you want to see this again, you want to see another questions and answers, please throw those questions in the comments. We'll do our best to identify which ones that we can answer. Till next time.